What's the biz, everybody? It's your boy Baker Maker, aka Dean Inslee, and I'm here to give you some true shit. So the next novel in Serena Valentino's Disney Villains series I'll be going over today is Poor Unfortunate Soul, a tale of the sea witch, which focuses on Ursula from The Little Mermaid. At one point, this novel series was only going to be a trilogy, with this being the last one, and with the way this story was structured compared to the first two books, I can definitely tell. I feel like the first two books mainly served to build up to this book due to the fact that the new characters introduced in the previous books played bigger roles in this one, as well as subplots becoming more relevant in this book as well. I can definitely see how this could have potentially been the climax for the overarching story, but I guess Serena changed her mind and decided to end the third book with a cliffhanger. So clearly, a fourth book had to be made. Characters like Princess Tulip and her nanny had bigger roles in this story, and it was definitely welcomed. The last we heard of Tulip, she was so heartbroken with the way things turned out with the prince from the second book that she even attempted suicide, but was saved by Ursula. Ursula agrees to spare the girl in exchange for her beauty and her voice, and Tulip agrees to the deal. Feeling like both have caused her nothing but trouble, it was specifically her beauty is why the beastly prince wanted to marry her in the first place. It was the Odd Sister's younger sister, Circe, who convinced Ursula to give up the deal in exchange for her shell necklace. Ursula agrees, and both Tulip's voice and beauty is restored. Given how she was described in the previous novel, I think it's safe to say that she didn't have much self-worth in herself. Just like what her nanny said, it wasn't her beauty that was holding her back. It was herself. It was her. However, by the time of A Poor Unfortunate Soul, Tulip has gained a sense of self and has become more confident and outspoken than she was in the past. Even briefly standing up to the three terrible witches. She even gains a new potential love interest, and he seems to treat her with way more respect than the beastly prince did. Speaking of which, we learned that him and Belle actually got married, and he feels bad for the way he treated Tulip, and want to make amends between the two kingdoms. Still, Tulip can't completely forgive him for his past actions, which is understandable. As for her nanny, we got to learn she's a witch herself. At some point, she lost her memories and powers, but have slowly regained them recently. Not only does the novel tell us that she even shares a history with the Odd Sisters, but even Maleficent as well? Questions for later. One of the Odd Sisters claiming that the Dark Fairy was her favorite. Again, questions for later. The book brings up Maleficent's name a lot, mentioning that she placed a sleeping spell on Tulip's cousin. That's right, Tulip is related to Aurora from Disney's Sleeping Beauty. Apparently, there's some bad blood, or at least a rivalry between the Dark Fairy and the Sea Witch Ursula. It was Maleficent who left the Odd Sisters an interesting message, warning them not to trust Ursula, leaving the sisters conflicted. Not only because they have formed a friendship with both Disney villains, but also because at the beginning of the novel, they agree to assist Ursula in her big plan to kill and overthrow King Triton as ruler of Alantica. In return, she'd help them find their sister Circe, who left them on such bad terms, and they have no way of contacting her through their usual means. So I guess that leads me to finally talking about the central character of the novel, the evil sea witch herself, Ursula. I really did like the origin Serena decided to give to Ursula. All we had to go off of in terms of her backstory from the 1989 animated film was that she used to be a resident of King Triton's palace before being banished and exiled by the order of the king. But the reason for this remained a mystery. Though it was heavily implied that Ursula's greed and use of dark magic was what led to her banishment. However, the musical version of the movie, the Little Mermaid stage musical, did include Ursula's backstory, finally answering the big questions of why she was banished. Although the story is the same as in the movie, it rescued a concept for the original movie that was eventually dropped, which is that Ursula and King Triton are siblings. When their father died, they were given equal share of the sea, along with two magical items. The Triton, Triton always carries, and a magic nautilus shell for Ursula. Triton and Ursula were meant to rule the seas together, but Ursula's greed began to grow, and she tried to use dark magic to usurp Triton, leading to her banishment. However, the musical was later retweeted by Glenn Castle, who made Ursula and Triton the seventh and eighth of 8 siblings, with Ursula killing their older sibling until she became queen. But she forgot to get rid of Triton. Ursula and Triton being siblings explain a lot about her motivations and actions in the Little Mermaid, especially how far she went to make sure Ariel failed, and thus Triton would do literally anything to set her free, such as giving up the throne. Which is why, for many years, fans of the Disney film have often considered this theory/concept canon. So it made sense for Serena to borrow this concept for her Ursula novel, as well as adding her own spice to it. After Triton abandoned Ursula when she was just a child, she was raised by a human fishman, unaware of her powers or that she was King Triton's long-lost sister. It was only after Ursula brings destruction to her old village to get revenge for them killing her father. Triton appears and tells her of their blood relations to each other, then brings her back to his kingdom. But he's disgusted by her octopus form and constantly forces her to conceal her true form in public, and even berates her for one day revealing her true self towards the other merfolk. The only person who stood up for Ursula and made her feel accepted was Triton's wife, Queen Athena. Not long after Athena died, Triton banished Ursula from the palace. Then years later, Triton finally came clean to Ursula that he indeed abandoned her and left her on land, even implying that he did it because even as a child, she refused to hide her octopus form. And although it's never explicitly said in the book, I bet he was responsible for her losing her memories of living in Alantica as a kid. And he displays no remorse for his actions, even going so far to say that the man who raised her got what he deserved simply for being a human. Now, if you've already watched the 1989 film, you should already be aware of Triton being an overprotective father of Ariel and his hatred of humans. But this book really displays a truly ruthless side of Triton we're not used to seeing. Sure, we've seen him become harsh and when it comes to parenting, but we knew it was just coming from a good place, and yeah, his prejudice towards humans did cloud his judgment. But I don't know. I don't know. I never saw Triton as the type to disown his own sister simply because of her appearance. That's why I believe there's more to this. Like I said before, when the Little Mermaid musical touched upon the concept of Ursula and Triton being siblings. It mentioned that Ursula tried to usurp Triton as the ruler of the oceans by resorting to dark magic, which I think is a good enough reason for Triton to cut all ties with Ursula. For all we know, Ursula did do this, but her motivation for doing so wasn't just for greed and power, which I'm sure did play a factor in this, but also due to the way Triton treated her. I wish Serena had included that in the novel. Instead, it just comes off as Triton banishing her for something so superficial as her appearance. And Triton is a much more complicated character than that. In favor of making us sympathize with Ursula, I feel like the novel definitely goes out of its way to villainize Triton. With all that said, it does make sense as to why Ursula would hate Triton as so much, you know? This novel does somewhat humanize the Odd Sisters a bit by describing how much they love their little sister and miss her, trying to speak normally instead of rhyming like they normally do, hoping it would please Cersei whenever they reunite with her, and of course the sacrifice they make at the end. They even sympathize with Ursula after hearing her story, and were willing to help her thanks to them being such good friends. Of course, they also did it because helping Ursula meant she would help them find their sister. That's why it hurt them deeply when it was revealed that Ursula had betrayed them by transforming Cersei into a writhing polyp, and secretly keeping her captive in her garden of lost souls to be used as a bargaining tool to get her sisters to do Ursula's bidding. One could even assume that if the three witches had initially rejected Ursula's request to kill Triton, being the villain that she is, she would have simply threatened them with Cersei's life, proving that any hope of goodness that was left in Ursula was gone. Despite the fact that Ariel is the daughter of the only person who showed her kindness and accepted her octopus form, Athena, Ursula allowed her hatred for her brother, as well as her lust for power, to completely consume her, which led to her to even hurt her own niece and betray the Odd Sisters, whom were the only friends she had. And this is not just a betrayal towards them, but to Cersei as well, since in the previous book, she claimed that she actually liked Ursula, possibly even considered her a friend. At this point, even though I did somewhat sympathize with Ursula due to her past, it doesn't change the fact that Ursula has become a cold-blooded, power-hungry monster that needs to be put down. So for the first time, I found myself actually cheering for the Odd Sisters as they used all the magic they had to help play a role in Ursula's ultimate demise, for both revenge and to free their sister from her clutches. This book allowed them to play a somewhat heroic role in the story. Due to Ursula's death, Cersei was freed along with the rest of Ursula's victims. To Triton's credit, he does admit to himself that he played a big part in Ursula's path to darkness. Too little too late, of course. Anyways, the magic used to help Prince Eric to kill Ursula takes its toll on the Odd Sisters, placing them in a death-like slumber. And the book ends with Cersei and the nanny sensing a certain dark fairy heading their way. So, yeah, I really enjoyed reading this book. And as soon as I had finished it, I knew it had become my favorite at this point. So for the next video, we'll be discussing the fourth novel in Serena Valentino's Disney Villains series, which is Mistress of All Evil, A Tale of the Dark Fairy. Now, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more videos like these, and most importantly, hit the notification bell if you want to be notified whenever I post these videos. With that said, stay beast.